Hey, how you doing, man? It's Rashawn the Dude Dad coming to you with episode 11 of the DeadRong podcast. A little bit of unsolicited sports talk. There's a lot to talk about, man. The regular season is finally over, so you got teams like my 49ers, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, Miami Dolphins, New York Jets, yada, 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 yada. Bury the hatchet. All of their seasons ended yesterday, and of course, with the season ending for those terrible teams, and a lot of coaches get axed. But we're not going to get to that. First thing I want to talk about, first things first, man, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and the decision for them to sit Saquon Barkley. Now, although I was totally against them sitting Saquon Barkley, especially when he was 101 yards away from getting the all-time rushing record and putting Eric Dickerson's record to bed, they sat him. Now, the reason why I was on board for it is because whether they make the Super Bowl or not, whether they win the Super Bowl or not, still is unknown. They may have said all of the starters and been fresh and still take an L and get bounced in the first game or bounced in the second game, bounced in the NFC Championship, or lose the Super Bowl. My thing is this, for Saquon, I know it's an individual accolade, but this is history. This is NFL history. And if that stands for however long, it could be 100 years, 200 years, people are going to remember that name and people are going to remember that record. Nobody of our, I would say, time would even know who Eric Dickerson is unless they were old enough to watch him play, unless they knew or they are historians in the game. When it comes to the record of people coming close, who are we going to bring up? Eric Dickerson. So, yeah, that was my stance on the whole Saquon thing. But I will say, with the fact that the Baltimore Ravens, when they played against the Browns, who they're lowly Browns, they're not going to make it to the playoffs. Their season ended yesterday. When they played them on Saturday, guess what happened? Zay Flowers hurt his knee, and so he may potentially be out for all of the postseason, their first postseason game, or it's TBD, to be determined. So in retrospect now, with me having that stance at first, when you do see guys like that getting hurt, when it's about to be crunch time and the playoffs matter more than anything, it does kind of make me feel like, okay, you know what? I'm going to give Sirianni and Nebraska the benefit of the doubt that they said all of their guys because, you know, God forbid, you never know what's going to happen. It could be some freak accident and he'll be done for the season, or he could be done for his career. You know what I mean? So shout out to them sticking to their guns. I still feel bad for, say, 2K Barkley because, you know, even himself, he said that this was something that was important for his father, was important for his family, and you know, like I said, cementing his legacy, not necessarily for the Philadelphia Eagles organization, but for the NFL at large, man. And it was huge. But one thing to take away from this game was the backups that played well. You know, you got guys like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Anais Williams, who caught his first TD pass, and Dotson, who really didn't get that much run, but how could you when you going or lining up in the slot and you got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Calcaterra and Dallas Goedert lining up beside you? Of course, they're going to be 1, 2, 3 options ahead of you. But let's talk about Tanner McKee, man. I'm not out on Kenny Pickett, but I'm going to tell you that Tanner McKee, the Mormon with the missile, as Mailata called him, or the Mormon missile, as Mailata called him, he looks good, man. He's throwing people open, and he's hitting his guys in stride. He looks like he's got an arm, and he's been throwing the ball where they say that Jalen Hurts tends to struggle at, within the hashes. Now, we didn't see him necessarily go for any of the big chunk plays, but he looked good, and albeit against the lowly Giants, I think it was somewhat of a scrimmage for the Philadelphia Eagles, but they look good. Their guys got some run, and you get to see some potential of the guys who may be taking positions for other guys who may sign elsewhere next year. Or nevertheless, though, it looked good. It was a win for them. There was nothing that they could lose because they was already locked into the number 2 seed. And let's talk about Tyreek Hill, man. How about him? I know he was trying to get the bag for him and his family when he went to Miami, you know, and he even tried to toot Tua Tagovailoa's horn a little bit and saying that he was one of the most precise passers that he's ever played with, which is crazy because he was just playing with Patrick Mahomes for the beginning of his career. So now being bounced out of playoff contention and then being sent home early, now lo and behold, instead of him taking like to his podcast or handling his statements in a different way, he rated while he was right in the locker room with his guys and they just got eliminated for playoff contention, and he's talking about, I don't know if I want to be here, the door's open and I'm out. They even said that he checked himself out of the fourth quarter, so he set himself. He didn't have an injury, he didn't get IV because he was cramping up or nothing like that. He just decided he wasn't going to play. He quit on his team. Now I'm going to say that's similar to Devondre Campbell when he checked out of the 49ers game and they told him they needed him to go in because Dre Greenlaw went down, and you know what he said, man? I'm out. What kind of teammate is that? And you know what? Look at the team that you left. You left Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and even though y'all just had lost to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl, you guys were just in the Super Bowl, so it's crazy that you guys didn't go. Nevertheless, while you were gone and in Miami, these boys are stacking up championships. They are back-to-back champions right now and are on the cusp of possibly making it to a three-peat. I hope that they don't get a three-peat. I hope they don't even make to the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm hating, but it doesn't even really matter. Man, you got to talk about what you walked out on, and sometimes you do gotta get paid. That $100 million with 80 of it guaranteed, that's generational wealth for you and your family. And I see you gotta secure the bag, and sometimes it's bigger than the game, but at the same time, I'm sure that Kansas City would have paid you some money, and you could have got some more championships, and on the cusp of possibly making your third, fourth, or whatever championship. So, point being, this dude quit on his team. I wouldn't want him in my locker room anyway. How do you go from being in South Beach thinking that you are going to have some type of playoff contention? You guys had the fastest team in the league for like 2 years in a row, and you did nothing. Did nothing. Speaking of not doing nothing, that's what Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been doing for the past couple of weeks. I think this is their fifth game in a row. You would think that they would want to go into the playoffs with a win, but they look terrible. I thought it was going to be a walkover on Saturday, but they were finding ways to lose. And I mean, I understand it was cold outside, etc. But at the same time, when you have a veteran quarterback, there's certain reads that you just got to know are easy. When you have a 3rd and 1, there's no reason why you should be throwing the ball 20 yards down the field. Russ, you're supposed to be cooking, and right now you're getting cooked, and you have legs. I don't know why you aren't using them. I'm not saying that you're going to be Lamar Jackson or you're going to be Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts or none of that, but when you got to get 1 yard, come on, man. You could do that in your sleep. When you used to play for the Seattle Seahawks, man, you would do that in your sleep. People were scared to go up against you, man. So I feel like with this, they're going up against the Ravens. And although they did beat the Ravens early in the year, the way that they're playing right now, I think they're not going to have any success. They're going to get bounced. That's going to be another one and done. I think that's 7 years in a row where they haven't won a playoff game. So we got to really have a conversation about Mike Tomlin. Like, is he really the coach of the future for them? Is he really going to be the guy that you think is going to take them over the hump in the future? I don't necessarily agree with that. And yes, he has had nothing but winning seasons, but at the same time, it's not about a participation trophy and just making it to the playoffs. It's about winning the ultimate game, holding and hoisting that Lombardi over your shoulders and celebrating with your team because you're world champions. Not a participation trophy because you've made it to the playoffs and you get bounced every single year for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. Nah, man, honestly, I think he should be on the hot seat, and I'm not championing or campaigning for him to be fired, but maybe they do need to make a change at the helm because obviously what's going on with him isn't working. I don't necessarily think that his leading of men, when it comes to the defensive side, he's doing it well, but on the offensive side, I don't think he has the right people in play. Even with a Greg Roman, look at Pickens. He's one last year. He doesn't even want to block. This year he's crying. And let me add that he had about 4 or 5 targets that were key targets, and he ended up not catching those passes. So what are you supposed to do with a dude like that? You can't blame the coach on everything, but at the same time, you are the one coaching these guys. You are the one building the culture in the locker room. You should be holding these guys accountable. So my opinion is, Mike Tomlin, I like you, man. Pittsburgh, you always grind it out, and although you've had all of these winning seasons, I think there needs to be a change. I'm sure he's going to get a job wherever he might go next, but I don't know, man. Look at the Bengals defensive coordinator. Look, he got fired day after, and rightfully so. Lou Anarumo, I believe that's the way that you pronounce his name. Lou Anarumo. He had the team playing the last like 2 or 3 games, but other than that, out of a 17-game season, 14 games, y'all were the worst defense in the league. And people were saying that he might potentially have a landing spot. Where? In college? Because how do you have the 32nd ranked defense in 32 or out of 32 teams, and you're supposed to be getting a head coaching job? Come on, man. It doesn't make sense. You got a guy who is arguably an MVP candidate every single year, and on the offensive side, he's running for his life, and then on the defensive side, he can't get any help because you guys can't stop a nosebleed. You guys can't do nothing. 32nd ranked defense out of 32 teams. Bottom of the barrel. So I'm not surprised that he got fired. I'm more surprised that the head coach didn't get fired. And I'm even more surprised that Brian Daboll of the New York Giants didn't get fired. And their GM didn't get fired. Y'all dudes decided to pay Daniel Jones instead of Saquon. And what happened? You invested your money into him, and now you had to cut him to cut your losses. You had to cut him to cut your losses. You decided to pay him instead of Saquon. Y'all let Saquon walk, and now he's 2K. Say 2K Barkley about to make a playoff run. This dude showed y'all why you should have paid him instead of Daniel Jones. So now y'all had 2 of the guys that y'all should have balling on y'all team. They're not even there anymore. What are y'all going to do? Y'all got a draft pick, messed up your draft pick by winning the game. Y'all had the first draft pick lined up, and instead of losing, not saying that you're supposed to lose, but you're supposed to lose. If you want that number 1 pick, you could have got Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to the NFL or declaring for the draft, but man, you could have had your pick and did something with it, or pick up a guy like Sam Darnold, maybe Kirk Cousins. Well, not Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins is washed. But yeah, y'all, I don't know how those guys, either of them, the GM, he should have got fired last year or mid-season or the beginning of the season when he let Saquon Barkley walk. But I'm not surprised that Doug Pederson lost or got fired. He, with Trevor Lawrence, Sunshine, coming out of Clemson, he was a top prospect. They thought that he was going to be the next Joe Montana. And outside of him having some very nice hair, he doesn't have nothing else nice about his game, man. He's been stinking it up. And for him to be a top draft pick like that, their offense is bottom of the barrel and have been. Only time they play okay is when they're playing in those London games. For some reason, they play better overseas. But nevertheless, man, I'm not surprised by the Doug Pederson firing. I'm actually surprised that he lasted this long in this season. I mean, as a head coach, you should have a little bit of time or a little bit of wiggle room. He had his wiggle room, and let's just be honest. Between that offense and him being like a quarterback guru, so they say, they just haven't looked good on offense. They look pedestrian. They look like a college team and not a good college team, like a Division II or Division III college team, and the defense non-existent. So, you know, man, wish nothing but luck or fortunes in the future for Dougie P. You know, the world champion Philadelphia Eagles coach from 2017 that led them to their first championship and got fired, I think, 18 months later. So yeah, I think he's a good coach, and he could possibly make some noise elsewhere. Maybe the Titans job would be a good fit for him, or even possibly maybe the Chicago Bears if they get some more offense for Caleb Williams. Maybe that might be something that he's interested in. But with some of these coaches, I'm getting fired. Like look at Gerard Mayo. Like, what was he supposed to do? He inherited a trash team. I mean, it was so trash that Bill Belichick couldn't even lead them to success. And so he had to go elsewhere, you know what I mean? And he didn't even get picked up. So I don't know if it was he wouldn't shake his own ways, or was it his verbal scolding of his team and calling them soft or things of that nature. But you would figure that a guy with 1 year, this was his 1 year with a team that he inherited that was trash. They didn't even give him the opportunity to try to see it through and see maybe if he could turn things around for year two. I think they got a good quarterback in Drake May, and that they could possibly do something with him and build around him as long as the defense plays up to his potential. But for him to have the shortest tenure of any head coach in the history of the NFL, I think it's absurd. And I don't know if they like the axe or the nail in the coffin was because he won, and him winning, they lost a first round draft pick. But man, the onus shouldn't necessarily always be on the coaches. These guys are grown men. These guys are grown men that you're coaching up. You got to be able to teach these guys, push them, but at the end of the day, you can't go out there and make tackles. You can't go out there and execute the game plan on defense or on offense. You can't go out there and get that 4th and inches or 3rd and inches, or pull if you're a guard, or run the right route and be on the same page if you're a quarterback. A coach can't do that. He can only do but so much in preparation. These guys got to be able to execute. So I feel like a lot of these guys are, I ain't going to say I feel, they are the scapegoats for these organizations. And a lot of times these players, because they have their name and status and they're famous, they get a cakewalk. They get a pass for not producing, and it's a little unfortunate. So, like I said, man, it's kind of messed up for Gerard Mayo in that instance. But what are you supposed to do, man? What are you supposed to do? I hope, speaking of people getting fired, that Nick Sorensen, man, for the San Francisco 49ers, that he gets fired. What the hell is he doing, man? You got Pro Bowlers all up in the defensive line. You got them in the middle linebacker, and Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner. You got Nick Bosa. You got so many studs. Hufanga came back. Diamador Lenore, Charvarius Ward. You got a defense that for any other team, man, has like sky's the limit for them, and they will be having top scoring defense, the least amount of yards. They will be a top ranked defense, and with him at the helm, they are the bottom 5 in defense. That's crazy for saying all of those names, all those home names that you know, and those guys that are producing at a high level with other coordinators. But as soon as this guy gets the job, they look trash. They look terrible. It's just like the scheme was terrible. They weren't getting coached up the correct way. So man, I really, and I'm not trying to vie for anybody to lose their jobs and not be able to take care of their families, but damn it, this dude's got to go. my man's got to go, man. Bring back Robert Saleh. He lost his job with the head coach for the New York Jets. Why not bring him back? He had this team humming before he got the opportunity, and this was the reason why he got the opportunity, if we're being 100% real. So, bring back Robert Saleh to be the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. Man, I'm pleading, bring him back. Or matter of fact, I don't even know who else is back. Maybe you could get a Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick in here, but those guys are going to be head coaches somewhere, man. But how about that game last night? Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions for the number 1 seed in the NFC. That joint was fireworks, a defensive display. Both of those defenses and their coordinators make them look like gurus. I would be surprised if Brian Flores or Aaron Glenn are not head coaches next year. Man, they looked good. I honestly thought that Brian Flores had the better team or the better scheme and he would shut down Jared Goff, because when Jared Goff is pressured, he kind of seems to lose his cool and start making bad decisions. And I thought that Sam Darnold has been even kill all year, and it would be him that would be victorious. I mean, you got Addison, you got Jefferson. What else do you need? If you just had Justin Jefferson, you would probably have 35 touchdowns and only 12 picks. You know what I'm saying? But lo and behold, man, Aaron Glenn, he had a better defensive scheme. He held them to 3 field goals, and the offense and Ben Johnson, there's nothing more that I can say about them and how they produced this year. It's just a shame that potentially the Detroit Lions, if they don't get it done this year, they are going to lose more than likely their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator at the same time, unless Ben Johnson gets a job. Well, I'm not going to say no, because Dan Campbell is their head coach. So Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are probably going to be gone, man. Straight up. But enough of that, man. The Vikings, they were shut down. That defense for the Detroit Lions shut them down, and they put up above 30. Anybody that's going to go against the Detroit Lions in this postseason, I'm telling you, you are going to have to put up north of 30 points. Book it. So after the game, it was interesting to note that when Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell shook hands, Dan Campbell said, "Hey, I'll see you in 2 weeks." So he was looking past the LA Rams and basically bookmarking the fact that the Minnesota Vikings are going to go into LA and beat them next week on Wild Card Weekend. I'm not necessarily sold on that. Although the Rams have a good defense, I don't think that they have the type of defense that the Detroit Lions have, or a coordinator like the Detroit Lions have. And so I think it's going to be a shootout. But if Sam Darnold can't put up points, if he lets that defense for the Rams rattle him like he was rattled last night, they may be a one and done. Because one thing that Puka Nacua is going to do in Cooper Kupp and what's his name? Last name's Brown. Their running back. Listen, the Rams are dangerous. You seen they put up 40 points, 44 points against the Buffalo Bills. Albeit in a game where Buffalo wasn't themselves and they did mount a comeback and they just lost by a field goal. Nevertheless, it just goes to show you how electric Matthew Stafford is and how explosive Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and the rest of that offense for the LA Rams is. But I'm going to be honest with you. The most intriguing game that I'm really, really, really honed in is that Eagles-Packers game. They said that Jordan Love hurt his throwing elbow, and after the game in his presser, he said that he was kind of not getting the feeling in his elbow or in his throwing hand. So you got to monitor that. Christian Watson, he had an ACL sprain or an ACL tear, and so he's going to be done for the year. That is their deep threat, and that is the way that they can balance out that tough Eagles defense. Remember, that Eagles defense is not the Eagles defense of old. Vic Fangio got them firing on all cylinders. So it's going to be interesting to see if Josh Jacobs can make that defense get soft by running it down, bring them safeties down, and possibly if those other wide receivers can step up. But I think with Jalen Hurts coming back now, asterisk with Jalen Hurts coming back, because they've been saying that he's in this concussion protocol, and they keep on saying that he's just progressing. He's progressing. They're not giving a timetable. Nobody has seen him at practice. So with Jalen Hurts playing the way that he's been playing and him being in there, I think it's a win. I don't even think it's close. They're going to be playing in Philadelphia, and the Baltimore Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers, book it. I think the Baltimore Ravens are going to blow them out of the water, especially with the way that they're playing. They're undefeated since Lamar Jackson's mom cussed them out after that one loss that they had. So he's undefeated since mom cussed him out. Shout out to mom for doing her thing. And then the Texas versus Chargers, I'm not sold on either of these teams, so I think it's a toss-up. Texas kind of feel like they they kind of weaseled their way in. And the Chargers, they look good on offense, but their defense just gives up way too many points. So it should be an interesting matchup. Hopefully CJ Stroud could get used to or get back to his normal form, because I'm going to be honest with you, CJ Stroud hasn't really performed the same way that we saw him perform last year. It's kind of crazy to see the drop off from one year to another. And we'll see though, man. You know how it is with that rookie coming out and then people get tape on him. So wild card weekend should be a little wild, man. You know, this is Rashawn the Dude Dad, and thanks for staying, man. It's episode 11 with the DeadRong podcast. It's some unsolicited sport talks. Me and my man EB6. Let's go.